Welcome to episode 14 of the Family Podcast Network, helping you work with your tough kids and even those that aren't. Coming at you from Tuscola, Texas, the new temporary home of the Family Podcast Network. I'm your host, Trey Gibson. First off, forgive my kind of overly dressy look today. We just got back from church today. Just had some things that were kind of running through my head. Thought it'd be kind of important to bring those up today. Topic for today is just going to be kind of some of the finer details of positive reinforcement parenting. So what is positive reinforcement parenting for some of you guys who may not have listened to the previous podcast? Positive reinforcement parenting is that you need to be spending more time focusing on your kiddos when they're doing things right than when they're doing things wrong. Now, the minute that you say that, you're going to get those parents that immediately jump in and say, oh, you're one of those parents who's just, if you'll just hug them, and if you'll just smooch them, and then if you just do those things and they'll turn out fine. You're one of those parents that thinks that's the way good parenting works. Most assuredly not. Kids need boundaries, and when they don't have boundaries, when anybody doesn't have boundaries, when they don't have limits to say you can only go this far with your behavior before you're going too far, when we don't have that, most humans, unless they've been taught those boundaries, will cross those anyway, and will eventually and ultimately break the rules. So kids need boundaries. We humans need boundaries. That's why we have a law here. Countries that don't have formal laws that they enforce, if you take a look at it, take a look what happens. It's just kind of the nature of humankind, right? And so kids need that. And I am not one of those guys that says if you just hug your kids and you smooch on them, that they turn out fine. It's not true. Research, history has shown that when kids are not given boundaries, that they do not do well. So when I say that, so we talk about positive reinforcement, the idea that we're talking about when we say that is that you need to be spending more time building your kids up than you do whenever you are correcting them or disciplining them. That's all it is. It's like a bank account. It works on the same principle, right? You build a bank account and you start out with $0, right? You take money and you put money in. What's that called? That's a deposit. And you keep making deposits until you build that amount up, right? And then you take money out. What's that called? It's a withdrawal, right? And you take that money out and then you withdraw from that account and it comes down, right? The key to successful banking, to successful finance is what? When it comes to bank, you always need to be making more deposits than you're taking out withdrawals. Now, for all of you who are already wondering if I will go and talk to Congress, no, I won't, because they've got some of the same issues, right? And I'm just playing, guys. I'm not trying to turn this into political, but the relationships with our kids operate on that. And so, if we spend more time building them up, right? What do you think that does to their bank account? That builds their bank account up. If I come home tonight and I bring my wife roses, and I give her roses, what is that? That's a deposit. That puts a deposit in the account, right? And then let's say I take the garbage that's just right over my shoulder here. If I take that garbage out, and she doesn't have to remind me to take it out, what is that? For her, comparatively, that's a humongous deposit, because she hates having to remind me to take. She hates the trash being left in there, and she especially hates it when she has to remind me. So that's a big deposit for my wife, right? And then, let's say I build all these things, and then I ask her to do something really hard, like, hey, could you make me some jerky tonight? That's an arduous task, and I love beef jerky, right? Now, that may take a withdrawal, but is she more or less likely to do it when I've built that up with her? She's more likely. But let's say that I come home, and I've built up this account, and then I tell her that she looks like crap, and that the house looks like she's been sitting around on her butt watching bonbons and watching I don't know why I'm having a brain fart about this. Soap operas all day, right? What is that going to do? I just got to take it out. And let's say I keep just hacking, and I tell her dinner tasted horrible. It tastes like a cat turd or something. And then I'm down here. And what's going to happen if I say, hey, will you make me a sandwich? What's going to happen? Is she going to be more or less likely to do it? Less likely. So the idea of positive reinforcement, parenting, is not this idea that we let our kids grow up thinking that they're the perfect self-esteem ever. I saw a Saturday Night Live skit last night, cracked me up, but it was about these you can do anything is what it said, and it was this talk show where they said that it doesn't matter if you're good or not at something, just as long as you do it and you try, then that's all that matters, and then you'll get good. This is not what I'm talking about here either. Although research does show kids have a tendency to do better when they're praised and rewarded for, I'm having a brain fart again. They do better when they're praised and rewarded for trying than they do off of just the results. And they have a tendency to get better results, like from school and whatnot, whenever they're praised for just trying. Now, eventually, we need to push them to do better. But the idea of the Saturday Night Live skit was making fun of those. It's like, oh, if you just do anything, as long as you try, then you're amazing at it. And I agree. But that's not the kind of parenting that I'm talking about being with our kids. I'm not talking about just building them up and that's enough for them, that's enough for them to do amazingly well. But the idea is that you are always building up that nice big fat bank account with them. So when you have to set boundaries with them, when you have to tell them no, when you don't have enough money to go out to eat and you say, I'm sorry, babies, we can't go, that takes a hit for them, but you're still in the black, right? If you're going to stick to the financial metaphor here. You're still in the black. And so that's what we're talking about when we say positive reinforcement parenting. One of the next number one thing, and this is the topic for today, many parents, when they come to me, they say, well, Trey, shouldn't these be things that they just want to do? Should I reinforce a kid when he gets up in the morning and brushes his teeth? Should I reinforce my kid if they obey me? Aren't these things that they should just want to do? Isn't this just things that this responsibility do? It's our responsibility as parents to obey, the law and authorities that are around us, right? I mean, that's our responsibility. It's our responsibility to honor higher authorities. If you believe in a deity like I do with God, we have those responsibilities. We should just do those things, right? And so should kids. I say at the start, absolutely not. How do you teach a kid to have a responsibility and do it to the point that they'll do it even whenever you're not driving them to do it? How do you get a kid to do that, especially if it's something that you don't like? We want to say that's not fair for us to have to do with our kids. Our kids should just do them because they're our responsibility. They shouldn't have to have any positives associated with it. I say I disagree, and I'd be willing to bet you agree with me. You probably just haven't thought about it this way. I'm going to turn the screen here a little bit. Y'all see that right over there? That is a sink full of dishes that I'm going to get to be doing here in just a little bit. Not many dishes, but I love taking the dishes in our household because my wife hates dishes. So I'm going to get up and I'm going to go do that. It is one of the responsibilities of my household. I'm just one of the main ones who does the dishes in this house. It's just kind of the way it's always been. I've always been the dish guy. I'm going to get up and go do that because it is my responsibility. But like most Americans, I do something that helps me develop a little bit of positives toward it. I'm going to pull out my iPhone here in a minute, and I'm going to plug that in, and I'm going to load up one of the podcasts that I downloaded on Wi-Fi the other day, and I'm going to sit down and I'm going to listen to a podcast that I enjoy. So what I'm inherently doing is I'm creating a pleasurable experience tied into something that I desire and I have no pleasure doing to help make it more fun. Many people don't like driving in the car, so what do? Well, we're getting kind of into new age vehicles now. We don't click knobs anymore, but maybe we push a button and we hit a button on our steering wheel, right? And we turn on the radio. Maybe you don't listen to music. Maybe you listen to talk shows. But we do things quite regularly to make mundane tasks that are our responsibility as adults more fun. Why is that not okay for kids to do? Now, I'm not saying this to be arrogant and prideful with you about this, but I'm really wondering, why is it that we don't expect ourselves as adults to be able to buck up to those, but then add some fun? And why do we not hold that same stipulation for kids? Well, if kids should just do it even though it's no fun, then why is it that we try to make our experiences more fun? And I know I'm speaking in generality. Some of you guys out there just take it up the tailpipe and do those ridiculously tough things that you don't like to do anyway, even when there's nothing to be fun. But my thought is this, and it's working so far, it's worked in the families that I've worked with. If you can associate a pleasurable task of a kid with something that they don't enjoy doing, like positive reinforcement. We run a pebble jar. As a matter of fact, I'll grab those for you right now. It's just so y'all can see those things. We keep a pebble jar in our household. These little small smooth pebbles that you can see down there. You can pick these suckers up and this glass jar at any standard Bed Bath & Beyond. And then each one of our kids gets a small little glass jar. And you can see that my son has written his name on here in whatever colors that he wanted, so it gives him some ownership. Every time our kids do something good, we take a pebble and we drop it in their jar. And when they get this jar filled up, then what they do is that they have a big tub of toys, and they can pick one toy once this thing gets filled up, all the way to tip top. So what happens is, Unpleasurable things, or things that may not be as pleasurable as like selfishness, all of a sudden become more pleasurable because they get reinforced for it. Positive reinforcement parenting. That does not mean that we don't draw lines with our kids, or that we don't set rules, or that we don't say, if you do that, this is going to get you in big trouble and you're going to lose your responsibility to do this, or this is going to get your butt spanked, or something like that. It's not saying that we don't do those things, but our family spends 5 times amount of focused, directed energy and effort into trying to help them fill this up than it is about administering a punishment, or taking something away, or losing a privilege, right? Those are important, but we spend much more time doing this because we have discovered that when we keep that bank account built up with them, when we do have to take out of their bank accounts, they're much more likely to go, yes ma'am, yes sir, because we have built that up with them. And that's what we're talking about today. Positive reinforcement works. I'm not saying that if you love them and hug them and you give them a gold star for any time they get something right, that makes them grow up fine, right? There's that gold star mentality. That drives me nuts, just like the rest of you guys. Not everybody is good at everything, and you're right when y'all say that. You're exactly right, and I agree with you. Not everybody is good at certain things. We all stink at something. But I can also guarantee you there is that one thing that kids are really, really, really good at. Just kind of the way the differences in our personalities are. But I wanted to end on this. So the parents that argue, and I get their point, they say, well, Trey, shouldn't they just want to do these things? You know, isn't there something inherently wrong with if the only reason they're doing something is solely about getting this? And the answer is yes. Earlier today, my kids came in, and my oldest son did something for the littlest one, and he gave her something. And the first question out of his mouth was, oh, Dad, does that get me pebbles? Right? The motive was wrong. If his motive for giving her something was solely about doing this, that's not the right motive. But you got to start somewhere. You start by associating pleasurable thoughts whenever they share things with their brother and sister. And then here's what we have discovered, and as this system has evolved, we've begun to move away from the sole idea of it's about giving them pebbles for when they do good things. And we've begun to move to, now they get pebbles for whenever they're doing good things motivationally. So today, my son walked in. Cora my littlest one needed to start getting some pajamas on for a nap, which is what they're doing right now. And my son Grant just walked in, came over there. She was having trouble getting her shirt off, helped her get her shirt off, helped her get her shoes off, went and got her clothes, and then went and crawled into bed. Didn't ask anything about pebbles. And he got pebbles for that. Not because of the action, but because his motive behind it was that he was being helpful. So start your kids out when they're little with reinforcing the behaviors. Did I get pebbles for that? Absolutely, baby. But then as they go, they'll start to become habitual. And first off, I've noticed our kids ask less and less about getting pebbles for certain things because now they're habit. And they're just doing them over and over. But the second thing that we've started to incorporate is now we're beginning to reinforce, not for the action itself, but for the motive. The motivation behind it. They get pebbles not because they did something thoughtful. Like today, we were sitting down at a table, and my son was sitting there, and we'd all gotten our forks out, and my fork had gotten hidden under my plate. And my son was sitting there, and he was messing, and he pulled his fork out, and he looked at it, and he looked at me, and he goes, oh, Dad, you don't have a fork. Here's your fork. And he gave me his, which was super sweet. My fork was right there. It was fine. But he got pebbles, not because he gave me a fork, but because he took the time to be thoughtful of everybody around him. He looked at my littlest Cora, he looked at his older sister Anna, he looked at Mama, and he looked at me, and he saw that everybody had a fork except Daddy. And so he gave his fork to Daddy. Here you go, Daddy. I can eat with my fingers. My son is 3 years old, and he's figuring that out because now we've begun to reinforce him. It's become pleasurable for him to do thoughtful things. And here's what I found is guys, they begin to ask less and less about getting pebbles for things. They just do it. They just do it because it's in their heart and because they've been taught and reinforced, because they had good feelings associated with doing things. Let's be honest. Being selfless sucks sometimes. Because sometimes I'm arguing with my wife, and I know in my knower, with all my knowing, that I'm right about something, right? But the selfless part of me says, you know what? She's hurting. Let's think about what she's feeling right now. Let's stop and think about what's going on with her. It's not what I want to do. The selfish part of me says, I'm right, and I know I'm right. And she's being irrational about this. But the selfless side says, put yourself in her shoes. And when I do that, of course, I find that in any case I've ever done that, my wife calms down and then she thinks it out and then she admits to things. First off, when I'm not trying to force her to think that way, she just calms down and thinks that way too. It's a fascinating phenomenon. At least my wife does that. Maybe everybody's doesn't, but mine does that. And the bottom line to that is the selflessness stinks. Selflessness is hard sometimes. However, if we can teach our kids to be selfless, reinforce them for the motivations behind what they do it. After we've reinforced what they're doing, then we reinforce them for what they're doing. Then what happens is them doing good things for people just becomes inherently learned. It just becomes pleasurable for them. And eventually we can turn this into helping them look to see the smile on somebody's face whenever Grant goes and hands her little sister a piece of candy. And then we can teach them that that's the joy you can get out of doing these things like selflessness and being thoughtful and sharing with other people, right? That's how we can do that. So be chewing on that this week. Go ahead and reinforce your kids' behaviors. I don't care if they're 2 years old. I don't care if they're 13 years old or 16 years old. Reinforce what they're doing and start there. Give that 4 to 6 months. And then your kids will begin to let you know when it's time. And then what you do is you begin to reinforce them for the motivation. Man, you have always been so thoughtful, Grant. I am so proud of you just at how thoughtful of a kid you are. That is so awesome. And you'd be amazed at how sometimes you don't even have to give them a pebble if you'll just take the time to say that. So be thinking about this week. How can you be more reinforcing? Positively reinforcing your kids, building up that bank account with this week. Look for ways. Get creative. Figure it out. If you've got a teenage daughter, try to figure out what the boyfriend does to build them up. They may be a good way to figure that out. If you don't know your kid yet, look at that. I'm not talking about being gross. I'm not talking about being gross with when I say that. But if they drop them little notes, why can't you drop them Daddy loves you notes? You know? Take a look at those things. Figure out those ways that you can build up into your kid. And as always, I recommend, there's a recommended readings list of books that I put out, and I recommend them. Get on there and check those out in my recommended books. It's on the top of the browser page up here. Take a look up there. There's a browser that says recommended readings. Go down there, look for The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman. Click on that book. It'll take you to the affiliate link over at Amazon.com. You can buy the book on Kindle. You can buy it for an iPhone if you have Kindle for the iPhone. You can buy a hard copy if you're a visual, tactile person like I am. Get those books and read that, and you'll be amazed that we send and receive love different. But that's a whole nother ballgame. That's a whole nother podcast. Be chewing on that this week. How can you love on your kid? How can you figure that out? Build those things up with your kid as much as you can. Our last podcast last week the other day was a good one. Individual time can be a great way to do that. So build them up, talk them up, associate good positive things that happen with them with the things that they do that are good. And then we can build on them from there. If you have any questions or comments about this podcast, I know this is a pretty thick comment that I'm condensing down into about 20 minutes. Feel free, email me. Trey Gibson, TreyGibson, at thefamilypodcastnetwork.com. Feel free to ask me any questions that you want. I'll see if we can get an answer out to you ASAP about what to do with our kids in certain situations, and we'll see if we can get you helped out. Also, I always encourage you, like me on Facebook and Twitter, guys. Great way to be able to get the information across to people so that way they can bring them back here and learn some of this information too. Also, consider becoming a member. If you feel like you are getting 60 cents a day for these podcasts, please feel free to take the time to become a member real quick. I've got them all breaking down into a certain amount of quantities of time. It's very easy. As always, I should appreciate you guys for all you parents that have stepped up to the plate and have been willing to sit down and listen to these podcasts. I cannot tell you how proud I am of you for doing that. Learning how to be better at something is tough, especially with parenting, which we're told we're supposed to know everything about by the time we get there, which nobody does. I didn't either. I am still learning. Even with the knowledge that I have, I am still realizing I've got a lot to learn. So, proud of you guys who are on here. I sure am glad y'all are here. Your kids will appreciate that. As always, remember, it's all about the relationships, and we'll talk to you guys later.